Hello, welcome everyone. I'm
Hello.
Ravi Shankar. I'm so pleased today to be introducing a brand new low residency MFA program, the Deledda Masters, which is accepting its first cohort in Sardinia. Today we'll hear from some of the faculty, hear a little bit about the program, hear some wonderful work, and of course, we're glad to take any questions that you have. So I'm going to first introduce the director of the program, Chirako Ofedo, who himself is a wonderful novelist as well, whose book Angelina has just been published. He's there in Sardinia now and has renovated a convent and created a beautiful space for writers to converge. In fact, the New York Writers Workshop will be there in less than a month, which we're looking forward to. So please, Chiriako, welcome. Tell us a little bit more about this wonderful new program.
Okay, thank you all for being here, and thank you uh, to Ravi for making this event possible. Thank you. I want to say just one thing before you hear from our great faculty, and I want to underline this thing because it matters. The Deledda Master is not a program; it is a master's degree accredited, internationally recognized within the framework of European ASTS framework. And that, I think, is not a small distinction because it means that you earn what you earn and learn here as weight, image, standing, and a place in the formal landscape of higher education worldwide. But I'll tell you that the credit, what the credits don't capture. This is not designed, this master is not designed to change your career. It is designed to change your life. The writers that are coming will come to Sardinia twice a year. Don't come for a certificate. They come because they have something to say, something to express, and have not yet found the form, the voice, the way to say it. They will come because serious writing requires serious company, a serious group of faculty, and that is exactly what we have built in this period. So welcome to Sardinia to change your life, becoming a real writer. Thank you. Or bye.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chiriako. And I think Evan Fallenberg, who is also a faculty member and helping with the program. Evan is the author of 3 novels, most recently The Parting Gift from Other Press. He translates Hebrew fiction, plays, and film. And his work has been shortlisted or won numerous awards, including American Library Association Award, the Edmund White Award, and the Penn Translation Prize. He's been a faculty member of Bar Ilan University, the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and City University of Hong Kong, where I first got to know him. Within the master, he mentors students in both fiction and translation, with a particular attention to voice rhythm and the ethical responsibility of carrying a text across languages. A wonderful writer, person, and a teacher. Welcome, Evan. It's great to have you. So maybe tell us a little bit about the program, and then maybe we can hear something of your work.
Okay, I'm happy to. Thanks, Ravi and Chiriako, for getting this going today. Thanks, Ravi, for that lovely introduction as well. I hope I live up to it. A little bit about the program. So what Chiriako touched upon was really the most important parts, but what it is to be in a program like this, how it enhances your own writing, and perhaps moves you from being a dabbler to a real writer, which means sitting and doing a lot of writing, accepting feedback on that writing, and thinking what can change and what needs to stay the same. But I think that what's unique about this program is that of the dozen or so people involved in it, we're all people who have been teaching for a while in quite a number of different programs around the world, literally around the world. And what that means is we've been able to bring the best practices from all these different programs, the way we teach, what we've learned from teaching students from around the world and in particular programs, to this program in Sardinia. This is the brainchild of Ciriaco, who's been wanting to bring a program like this to Sardinia for a while. And he's been a very good learner. He has been looking to see who would be the right people to bring to teach. What's the best structure for the program? How can we make this feasible and affordable for people to come and enjoy the program? So I think we've got all of those elements. I would just like to re-emphasize, of course, you can learn all the details about the program from the very good website, but maybe the most salient points to remember are that to focus on your own writing means writing. Yes, it can be going to workshop, and yes, it can be reading craft books, but really the act of writing is exactly that. You have to sit and do the writing. So in a program like this, a low residency program, you're on your own for a good part of the year. And then twice a year, you come and meet with the cohort of students who are coming like you to learn, along with a certain number of faculty members who join you. And together you work in workshops intensively during that 1 week in November and 1 week in May in Sardinia. You'll be doing crafting classes, workshops, a number of other things very intensively. And then you go back home and you are mentored by one individual for the next 5 or so months as you progress with your own text. So really, as far as I'm concerned, it's the best way to get ahead with your own writing. I know that I personally, when I was doing my MFA, I came in having written one short story and I left having finished my first novel. And it really was the right combination for me and for many, many other people to get to where you want to be as a writer. I've been asked today to, like all of my colleagues who are with us today, to give a little sample of my own work. So I'm going to give a very short reading from the very first pages of a novel I've been working on. I won't tell you for how long. It's called The Xenia Miscellany. And I just have a couple of quick things to explain before I read. The first is that the pretense of the novel is that I'm not the author, but the author is actually a 70-year-old, very acclaimed, very successful female writer who lives on the Upper West Side of New York. And she has written 2 of the sections of this novel, and the third is written by one of the characters in the novel. And her name is Ellen Berg Lindquist, and it will be in her voice that I'm reading the beginning section of the novel. And secondly, what I need to mention is this word miscellany or miscellany. I think in America it's pronounced miscellany. In British English, it's miscellany, and the character himself prefers miscellany, so I'm going to pronounce it like he would. And it's basically like a commonplace book, a gathering together of quotes that come from the reading life of a person like Virginia Woolf or E.M. Forster, who kept commonplace books or miscellanies. So that's what you need to know. And now I'm going to read just the first 2 pages of that novel. Yale Morgan Black came to me through an ad I placed, a few meager words in a weekday issue of the New York Times in November 2017. Published author needs help with archives several afternoons a week, flex hours. We met a few days later at my apartment. I served tea and store-bought cookies that he did not touch. He wore a suit jacket over a crew neck sweater and dress shirt. His shoes were polished, but one lace was frayed. He caught me noticing it and recrossed his legs to hide that shoe. His cheeks reddened. Yale had read one of my novels for an undergrad class and others by choice as a result, but he made no big effort to use that to impress me. We spoke about literature in general terms, but also about his hometown of Xenia, Ohio, and vaguely about what he wanted to do with his life. I smiled more than he did, coaxing him, I think, to do the same. His demeanor was serious. He was thin, too thin. New York had proven tougher than he expected. I hired him to be the archivist of my papers, partly because he was serious and partly because he was too thin, and because he was quiet, quieter than all the people in my life, my children, editor, agent, friends, doormen. New York is full of noisy people, and Yale was not one of them. He was a counterweight. He would be working in my home, and I saw that I could rely on his reticence to make noise, that he would think twice before disturbing me, and that was irresistibly attractive. He came to me 3 times each week for the next 3 months. Mostly he worked on his own, though occasionally we needed to confer. He sat in my study, going through boxes I brought him from storage. Occasionally he hunched over a magnifying glass, which made him look older than his years. We always ate lunch together from his first day of work. Simple lunches, a soup, a sandwich, cut vegetables. And I learned his preference for small portions and his tastes, rye or wheat bread, nothing spicy, no tomatoes, a mix of colors on the plate. He would finish every morsel, often looking surprised at himself. He never drank with his meal, only afterward, a cup of tea with a sweet. Over lunch, I asked questions in a voice quieter than usual, softer. He answered, though not expansively. You can get to know a person over the course of 40 or so lunches and tea breaks, and work. But there will always be missing bits, stories untold, secrets, veiled truths, facts blurred with intent, memories not quite recalled. I wonder if he knew that from our first meeting I saw in him a character for a novel, though no novel I had plans to write. Still, I could not help coupling what I could see, fingers that belonged to a lankier body, a countenance of worry, scrupulous self-maintenance, genteel, educated urban poverty, with what I could not, a social life, a dream life, a sex life. So I began to make a world for him, a world parallel to the one he was actually living, a world he would never know about. Our work ended when tragedy struck his life, and his mother came to New York and packed him and his belongings up and brought him back to Xenia, Ohio. I wrote letters to him. His mother wrote back to say he was despondent, unable to pen a response. She expressed her worry, though never with unnecessary drama. It was more like gratitude that she could share him and her worry with me. I knew nothing of the trip he suddenly undertook until it was over. Precisely 1 year later, I undertook the same trip in order to understand. It was only then that I learned of the miscellany he had been keeping since college. He never mentioned it during our lunch breaks or tea breaks, or the time I invited him to a Friday night dinner with my children. And when I sat holding that miscellany in my hands, I knew I would do something with it, and I knew what that something was. Here within is Yale's miscellany and the novel I have written. These 3 sections, the novel, my afterword, the miscellany, can be read in any order, but know that reading the afterword before the novel will spoil the plot. If I were a different person, a different writer, I might have written a factual history of Yale's time in New York. Instead, as a writer of fiction, I use the facts as my starting point, the opportunity to tell lies in the name of art, or truth, depending on how you look at it. I have used Yale, used his life, and used his work, though not, I hope, by exploitation. Rather, I have tried to make sense, for him and for me, of the muddle we call living. Ellenberg Lindquist, New York, December 2020. So that's my reading for today. And back to you, Ravi.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Evan. And great also to hear about the program. I will say some of my colleagues I taught with at the Sydney University of Hong Kong MFA, one of the greatest programs. And the wonderful thing about a low residency is you can be working, you can have a job, but you still are making time for your creative life, and you're getting feedback, really extensive feedback. I would write 3 or 4 page letters, edits, and then twice a year you get to go to this beautiful island of Sardinia to meet your fellow cohort, to meet the faculty. So I think it's a wonderful option for so many people. And I'm really excited to introduce our next reader, who is constantly traveling, I think, Robin Hemley, an American writer and essayist. He's the author of 16 books of fiction and nonfiction. His most recent book, How to Change History, a Salvage Project, continues an exploration of memory, identity, the porous boundaries between personal and collective narrative. And of course, a wonderful teacher to have on our faculty because he wrote a great craft book, Turning Life into Fiction. It's been around and reprinted for over 3 decades, really seminal and influential. He's graduated from the Iowa Writers Workshop, is the founder of Nonfiction Now, the international conference dedicated to the art of nonfiction, and served as the director of the nonfiction writing program at the University of Iowa. And he was also the inaugural director of the Writers Center at Yale and US in Singapore. He's gotten numerous distinctions, a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Rockefeller Fellowship, multiple Pushcart Prizes, and his essays and stories have appeared in leading journals, including the New York Times, the Paris Review, and McSweeney's. How lucky we are to have someone like Robin, and within this master, he'll mentor students in both creative nonfiction and narrative forms with a focus on transformation of lived experience into literature, the ethics of storytelling, and the exploration of hybrid and experimental modes of writing. So welcome, Robin. It's a real pleasure to see you virtually and to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Ravi. It's great to be here, and thank you for that introduction. There's so many things I love about this program. I'd say number one is the faculty and Chiriaco, and I've worked with almost everyone on the faculty before and consider them friends, and I can vouch that they're all not only wonderful writers, but wonderful mentors as well. I just got back from Sardinia, so I can say that it still is a lovely place and a perfect place for a master's. I would say that the piece that I'm going to read reflects something about how I teach and how I frame writing for my students. I'm going to read the prologue for my book, How to Change History, my book of essays. When I wrote the prologue, I didn't know it was the prologue. I wrote it years actually before I wrote the book and put together the essays. And I stress with my students that that none of us really know what a book is until we've gone through different drafts. And it's a very protean type of process. And so when students are frustrated, say, oh, I don't know where this is going, I think that it's important to allow the book to sort of form organically. And I try to sort of stress that we write into the unknown quite a lot, and that there's frustration in that, but there's also great pleasure in that. And I try to mentor students with that kind of ethos, I guess. So this is a very short introduction, prologue to How to Change History, and it frames really sort of my main concerns in the book. It's called Moments of Attention. On a plane recently, I glanced a few seats over and spotted someone watching that iconic 1980s film, Wall Street. What fascinated me was Daryl Hannah's hair, big blonde ringlets framing her face, her coiffure making me unable to see her as the 20-something actor she was then. She looked to me like an impersonator, someone old wanting to hang on desperately to the styles of her youth. I suppose this is another way of saying the film looked dated, but it's more than that. What dogged me as I watched Daryl Hannah in growing horror, she might as well have been pulling out her dentures before she went to bed with Charlie Sheen, was that I had lived through that era too. What was I thinking? What was everyone thinking, and why don't I still think that way? Not only was Daryl Hannah's hair uncomical at the time, but it was the norm. And then a switch turned off, and just as suddenly her hair looked stupid. And you must say the word stupid in your head with the kind of British bluntness and accent of, say, a Ricky Gervais. Okay, nostalgia, there's that too. If I had my way entirely, I wouldn't invite nostalgia to the party at all. But I think we must let it in, though not allow it to stay too long, or ply it with drinks, because nostalgia quickly goes weepy and limp, and then you have a real mess on your hands and have to call an Uber. What I'm interested in is this hypothetical light switch that makes something au courant one day and utterly stupid the next, or at least irrelevant or forgotten entirely, people included. I might have briefly worn a mullet. I definitely owned a Nehru shirt. But perhaps I'm going about this a bit too glibly. Not everything defunct is laughable. That may be true of fashions and fads, but certain defunct technologies retain a trueness. I own 2 ancient phonographs, one an Edison player that spins blue wax cylinders, and a 78-speed phonograph from the 1920s that makes me neither nostalgic nor derisive. I just think it sounds great, scratches and all. I know that no one else cares for Annette Hanshaw singing True Blue Lou from 1929, but I do because of reasons that are so much a part of me I couldn't possibly verbalize them without reducing them to nothing. I love this song, too, as a surviving artifact from a distant past in which I was not alive. I'm fascinated that Annette Hanshaw in her day was a star, and people went around humming her songs and made love to her music and gained the courage to propose or break it all off or give it another shot, triggered by this music. And then they didn't. Am I the only one? I don't think so. Who, when watching The Wizard of Oz or listening to Annette Hanshaw, think, stupidly, I know, what are they doing here? They're dead. That's not them, but it is. I can't look at Judy Garland without looking at her future, too, the shambles of her alcohol and drug-addicted life. I feel an odd concern and sympathy for the young woman in the film, knowing as I do that the studio will load her up with pills and that she will struggle for the rest of her life with addiction. The vital image of the 16-year-old on the screen seems almost a mockery, akin to the Wicked Witch mocking Dorothy when she sees Auntie M in a magic globe. As Auntie M frets over Dorothy's whereabouts, Dorothy tries to respond, but they are in different lands, on different planes. For me, watching this, Garland is as much a prisoner of her time as Dorothy is of the Wicked Witch. What I see most clearly in the magic globe is her defunctness. Here I'm using the word defunct tragically, not comically, because the word is at least as tragic as it is comic. There is no escaping defunctness. We can only attempt to understand it and contemplate it and grope for the light switch. Think of this moment of attention as a light switch. Think of it as a toggle between defunctness and relevance. Think of these words as part reliquary, part rescue mission, part memorial. Thank you.
Sorry, I realized I was on mute there. And let me bring, I was going to say that I was just saying, wow, how honored I am to be part of this wonderful faculty. And Robin's essay is proof of that. And certainly our next reader, Victoria Riddell, the author of 4 books of poetry, 6 works of fiction, including the novel Loverboy, which was later adapted into a feature film, and the poetry collection Paradise. Her work has received many major honors, including fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, tenured faculty member at Sarah Lawrence. She has spent decades mentoring writers in MFA and undergraduate programs while developing her own distinguished body of work across poetry and fiction. Within the master's, she will guide students in the development of voice, emotional precision, and the shaping of character-driven narratives across literary genres. And she's coming in to us from the West Coast. So wonderful to have you, Victoria.
So nice to be here, Ravi. You can hear me? I'm worried about this unmute thing. I'm excited about this program. And one of the things that excites me about the low residency has been already discussed. And that's the notion of the mentorship. In so many ways, a low residency program, what I love about it is that it mimics truly what a writer's life really looks like. So someone really does probably have to have a job and figure out how to write inside of that life. And so to come together in those 10 days that are really intense and mind spinning and exciting, but then to go off and figure out how you actually are going to integrate a serious writing life into your life, or to make it your life, and to make the other parts, the ancillary part of your life, is part of that work. And I think in terms of that, the mentorship, or when I'm working with a student, I feel like part of it is helping them come into their work, but also some of it is really helping people figure out how to shape a life that they want. So whether it's really figuring out when you're waking up and actually trying to write, and moving your work along, and how you manage those periods, as Robin spoke to, of just utter frustration and feeling like you're coming up against the wall, but how to stay with that until you push through it into some messy, probably, but extraordinary unknown, which is exactly the place I think we all want to be when we work. I'm going to just read the opening 2 pages of the most recent book, which is a novel called I Am You. It came out last September. And the little bits you need to know to hear the opening pages are that it takes place in the 1600s, not a place I ever thought I was going to enter into. And it concerns the lives of 2 women who are painters, a kind of an extraordinary thing in the mid-1600s in the Dutch Republic, where women were not allowed into the painters' guilds. And it's in the voice of a woman who starts as a servant in a family and then becomes the paint preparer, assistant, and painter in her own right to the other painter, Maria van Oosterwijk. So here we go. We're in the 1600s. I don't think you need to know more than that, in the Dutch Republic. I was shy of 8 when I was put out to work. The family that took me in was in need of a boy, and so it was a boy I became. Hair sheared, last name twisted to my first. I was known as Peter Vinches, my 2 family names stacked as one. It was a long time before I was once again Gerta. I was happy to be Peter. I fetched and carried split wood and rubbed dirty, splintered hands along my woolen pants. I scurried up to the roof to repair tiles. I did my share of slaughter. And from the other workers, I learned a fast mouth and was unafraid to use a boy's bristled tongue. Given a bed, I didn't have to share with 2 sisters, my own yellow coverlet embroidered with lilies, sweet and savory cakes, bowls of stewed meat, second helpings without even asking. Already, my life was much better. Hunger makes us selfish grabber of the sweetest child, and the promise of a child's belly full will make it easy to turn a daughter to a boy and a rampant liar of even the kindest parents. A full belly is no small thing. I didn't for a moment miss the girl I'd been or imagine the woman I might become. I didn't cry once for my mother. No doubt you've heard about the glorious time we lived in, where every day some porcine gentleman trumpeted great new wealth. But it's not only the men of wealth, the fishmonger, the boatman, the tile maker, even a family servant like myself. We may not have been the owners of the East India Company. Still, we laced our wine with cinnamon and nutmeg. We learned to talk with a slick merchant's tongue and a philosopher's loft. We were all bestowed with the blessing of those fat years. No doubt the pigs and the cattle that roamed the fetid canal streets also heard they were fatter and luckier pigs and cattle than any before. Everything wonderful came through our ports. A crowded harbor of ships arrived with new goods every day. Silk and lace finer than any slipped through our fingers. We'd not known what we lacked till we touched gold and purple threads or wiped the sticky juice of a pineapple from our lips. Then it became our standard. Of course, we've all seen the rare tulips. Even the butcher, the sweet streeper, felt feverish watching the auctions. A golden age we were. We, in this rare moment of peace and health, didn't feel shame to be announced lucky. We remembered war. We remembered plagues marked on our door and knew they would return. I'm going to stop there. Thank you. Back to Ravi.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Victoria. Yes, in the MFA program, there will be multiple genres covered, as you've heard, bits of essays, fiction. I think next up we'll bring Luis Francia. Luis, are you with us? Hi, Luis.
Yes. Hi, Ravi. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
And hello,
Absolutely.
everyone.
So let me just introduce you very quickly, and then it would be great to hear from you. Luis Francia is a Filipino-American poet, memoirist, and a cultural historian. His work explores identity, diaspora, and the intersection of literature and history. His award-winning memoir, Eye of the Fish, received both the PEN Open Book Award and the Asian American Literary Award, and his nonfiction and poetry have earned national and international recognition. He was a former editor of The Village Voice. Oh, I missed that. A longtime contributor to major publications. He currently teaches at NYU. And within the master's, he will mentor students in poetry, memoir, narrative nonfiction, and with a particular attention to voice, cultural memory, and the shaping of personal experience into literary form. A great friend. It's wonderful to see you, Luis. Welcome, and thank you for sharing your work.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm glad and honored to be here. I'm actually in Japan, and it's about 10:45 or 10:30 in the evening. But at any rate, so I will be reading from my last published book, which is the Sahara of I, and I'll be reading 2 poems that were written during the pandemic, about maybe shortly after the pandemic, when I had time to go over some notes I had taken, because obviously during the pandemic, a lot of us were basically isolated and immured within our apartments. At any rate, I'll be reading 2 poems. The first one is called Masks. We are in the clear now, and our thoughts sail towards one another. Let me take you on board, where love will be the wind that navigates our ship through straits Magellan never saw. A Pacific only you and I know, in the company of blue fin, in the long delayed steps we take, the hugs we give each other. We will sing the absence of masks and cast away the masks of absence. The second one is a longer poem. And to give you a bit of a background, our rear window faces the backyard of our neighboring building, which has a number of lovely trees. And every morning I'd look out and see all these squirrels running up and down the trees. And of course, I was very envious because they didn't have to worry about anything other than being squirrels. And this is called Views to Chase Away the Lockdown Blues. From our 5th floor airy now cell, I spot my neighbors, clad in fair, who pay no maintenance fees nor assessment charges, for they are free in a tree, free to lead such swinging lives, hedonists all, whether backyard aerialists or speed demons careening up and down the leafy highways and their branches. Sometimes do they engage in quarrels, these squirrels, or avoid courtships where the squire never takes no for an answer. Birds and the bees, leave them be, and bushy tails tell a tale I will not see behind the bushes, allowing them the privacy I no longer have, their intimacy not to be Instagrammed, Facebook, Twittered, and Snapchatted. But they raise no scandal, pay no heed to social distancing, au contraire, commit no mayhem nor murder, nor keep me from my night-appointed slumber, nor do they raise a fuss when through my open window the raucous blast of horn and drum and piano shakes their leaves. For all I know, they too have their dens of cool, chattering knowingly over roasted acorns and beetle juice of Bird, Miles, Coltrane, Ella, Louis, and Billy. Sharer's secret I salute in the symphony of this maddened city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis. Wonderful. Yeah, so you can hear, no matter what genre it is that you want to study, there's a mentor who would be happy to work with you. Next up, we have Rachel Kaddish, and Rachel is an award-winning novelist and essayist. Her most recent novel, The Weight of Ink, was a USA Today bestseller and a recipient of a National Jewish Book Award. She's been a fellow of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Bellagio Center, and the Bogliasco Foundation, and the New York Public Library. She teaches fiction at Harvard University's Division of Continuing Education. And within the Master, she will be mentoring students in nonfiction and fiction with a focus on work that grapples with history. Her teaching emphasizes character-driven plot, vibrant dialogue, and a story's cohesion from its details to its overarching structure. Welcome, Rachel.
Ravi, thank you. And hoping everyone can hear me okay. If there's any problems, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. But I'm so excited about this program. I've taught, like everyone else here, I think I've taught in a lot of different contexts. I think low res is a fantastic way to approach things. Actually, what Victoria said, Victoria, you and I have never met, but I love what you said about how it really prepares you for the actual writer's life. And I love the phrase extraordinary unknown. That's what we're all stepping into all the time as we write. I write and enjoy teaching a lot of different forms, and I love historical fiction, but also fiction set in contemporary times and science fiction and memoir and sort of all of it. I thought I would read two very brief excerpts from my last novel, The Weight of Ink. The total of all of it is just over one page. Weight of Ink is a historical novel set, a sort of braided narrative, half is in the 17th century and half is in the present day. And I'll try to weave in just a little bit about how I approach teaching different things. So just to context for the novel, years ago, I was thinking about the Virginia Woolf quote in A Room of One's Own, where she poses the question, what if William Shakespeare had had an equally talented sister? What would have been the fate of a woman like that? And Woolf's answer is very succinct and very depressing. It's as regards to a female Shakespeare, she died young, alas, she never wrote a word. And of course, you can't argue that given the realities of women's lives in the 16th and 17th centuries, that is the most likely thing, that a woman who had a play in her to write, or a philosophy, or a symphony to compose, or a painting to paint, or higher math in her mind, would not have been able to do it. But some did. Right? Whether they did their work anonymously or under a man's name. And I thought a woman to do something like that would have to be a genius at breaking the rules. I thought, okay, that's fun. I could have fun working on that. Long story short, I settled on a historical time period. I became interested in this small community of refugees from the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisition who were first in Amsterdam and then some in London, tiny semi-hidden community in London. And I started writing, alternating writing and researching, and I never outline. I can't really outline because to me, everything is an improvisation that comes out of character development. So I started with just this voice, and it's a character confessing something. I didn't know what. And usually the first thing I write gets cut, but somehow this stayed. And this is just the opening passage of the novel. June 8th, 1691, 11th Sivan of the Hebrew year 5451, Richmond, Surrey. Let me begin afresh, perhaps this time to tell the truth. For in the biting hush of ink on paper, where truth ought raise its head and speak without fear, I have long lied. I have not to defend my actions, yet though my heart feels no remorse, my deeds would confess themselves to paper now as the least of tributes to him whom I once betrayed. In this silenced house, quill and ink do not resist the press of my hand, and paper does not flinch. Let these pages compass at last the truth, though none read them. So I wrote that, and I thought, okay, she's confessing. Let's see where this goes. The voice that you just heard ended up being Esther Velasquez, who's the main character of the 17th century portions of this novel. And she's an orphan raised in the same Jewish community of Amsterdam that exiled Spinoza. And she moves from Amsterdam to London as part of the household of a blind rabbi. And since he has no other educated person in London to read and write for him, she does it. And in the process, she gets access to books and learning that would otherwise be barred to a young woman. And the more she reads and studies, the more she feels there are questions she's desperate to ask, questions in that age that were forbidden, questions about God and the universe and free will. But she can't keep herself from asking them, no matter the danger those questions would bring down on her household if it was known what she was writing, while the rabbi can't see what she's writing or to whom she's addressing her letters. So that kicks off the plot. And I just want to pause and say that plot is not something I think of independently. It's not something I think of first. Like I said, I don't outline. I think about characters and the pressure that they're under. Because you take people and you put them under pressure and they do stuff, and that stuff is the plot. But it all starts with character for me. So one of the things I focus on a lot when I work with students is, if you have a plot problem, we can get to that later. Let's talk about your characters. Let's talk about who they are and the pressures they're under. There are two other things that I think people think are specific to historical fiction, skills that I work on with people working on historical fiction, but also in other forms. Historical fiction involves world building, figuring out the world your characters move in and how it shapes them. But so does science fiction. So do a lot of other forms. So there's world building in almost every form, and I enjoy working with people on that. And also, of course, in historical fiction, you may have to pay a lot of attention to language. Like, for example, using the word compass as a verb, let these pages compass the truth and unread them, and what that evokes in us. But again, the texture of language is part of revealing character. So I love to work closely with students on language. Other excerpt I'm going to read is the other thread of the novel. Takes place 350 years later in London. Esther's voice has long since been lost, and we're in contemporary London with a woman named Helen Watt. She is a professor of history, a British woman. She has a complicated backstory and very personal reason for her passion for Jewish history, and no, she does not want to talk about it. She's near mandatory retirement. She's in poor health, and the key thing to know here is, among other things, she has a hand tremor, which means she should not be handling delicate documents. And the novel begins when she's received a phone call from a former student she doesn't even remember, someone named Ian Easton. He says he took her history class years ago. He and his wife have a 17th century house that they're renovating to make it into an art gallery. Someone opened up a staircase to put in wiring and discovered these shelves crammed with papers. They're clearly very old. They're in Hebrew, they're in Portuguese, they're signed with the name of a rabbi. So he calls her and basically says, can you come get these papers out of here, do the right thing with them and get them out of here. Helen is skeptical that the papers have any value or even 17th century, but she goes. And it's Helen, with the help of a very arrogant grad student named Aaron Levy, who will begin to examine, these are the documents that Esther left behind. So I'm just reading, it's a few paragraphs. This is when Helen first arrives at the house and sees the papers. There, on a small card table beside the window, was a single cracked leather-bound volume. Beside it lay the 2 pages Ian had told her about over the phone, the first items his electrician had removed from under the staircase upon discovering the documents. For an instant, she allowed herself to stare at the pages, taking in the thick, textured paper she dared not touch. Then, at the counterpoint of 2 alphabets on the page, the Portuguese lettering that led from left to right, interrupted by scattered Hebrew phrases that ran in the reverse direction. Slowly, she read and reread. Ian's voice coming from just behind her. Over there, he said, and pointed. She lifted her eyes. There, in a dim corner at the base of the staircase, untouched by the blinding light of the landing's windows, was a small panel that had been forced open. Ignoring Ian's tentative offer of help, Helen approached the opening, lowering herself slowly to the floor, her cane trembling heavily under her weight. She knelt before it like a penitent. She stayed that way for a long time, her hands pressed to the cool floor, and a great heaviness nearly overcame her, as though all her years had suddenly taken on physical weight. For a long while, she simply stared at the crammed shelves, breathing very quietly. Then finally, knowing she should not, she lifted a quaking hand to remove a single page. A moment only. The page, astonishingly, rested unharmed on her two outspread palms, like a bird that had agreed for just this moment to alight there. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel. And it's so great to hear about the way people conceive of creative practice, really diverse. And you will, when you are in this program, work with a range of different faculty. I should also mention, for those of you who don't know, Grazia Deledda was the first Italian woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature back in 1926. She was born in Nuoro. And our next reader, my great friend and colleague, Tim Tomlinson, can attest to the fact that Sardinia is a magical place. We had our very first immersive writing retreat there. We're going to be headed back there in less than a month. And I think that we experienced when we were there the Feast of St. Anthony with these enormous bonfires and the dance of the Mamatones and a wonderful choral performance and the warmth and generosity of a place that's Italy, but not really Italy. And Tim can certainly tell you more about New York Writers Workshop and the upcoming program. He's an American writer, poet, and educator whose work reflects a deep engagement with the natural world and the fragile ecosystems that sustain it. His most recent book, Listening to Fish, Meditations from the Wet World, blends poetry, prose, and photography in a meditation on the beauty and vulnerability of the world's coral reefs. He's also the founder and director of the New York Writers Workshop. We run immersive writing retreats around the world. And the co-author of a really important book, and I think part of why a program like this is so instrumental, the Portable MFA in Creative Writing, which is a very widely used guide, also on multiple printings, on the craft of writing. He teaches writing at New York University's Global Liberal Studies program. And within the master, he'll mentor students both in creative nonfiction, poetry, and in hybrid forms, encouraging attentive observation, literary experimentation, and a deep, sustaining engagement with the living world. So great to see you, Tim. Welcome.
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you, everyone. Fantastic series of readings, and so delighted to be a part of this. I'm still, I would pay anything to find a picture of Robin Hemley with a mullet. Robin, please do. So we're going to be in Sardinia for our second conference in Sardinia in August. We'll have 1 week in Oristano. We'll be doing a week of master classes with a small cohort of super accomplished international writers, co-taught by myself and my dear friend Ravi. We'll have special guest novelists, Emma Claire Sweeney from the UK and Peter Zalahi from Hungary. They'll be joining us for a few days at the beginning and the ends of the week. And we meet each day for workshops, each evening for Scandalous International Revelry, which we kind of began back at that Feast of St. Anthony in 2020, I think it was, right before COVID. So Ravi mentioned the organization New York Writers Workshop. We're now in our 26th year. This is our 6th year of doing international conferences. And we started in Sardinia with our host, Ciriaco, and we're so happy to be back there again. In 2006, New York Writers Workshop published the book that Ravi mentioned, the Portable MFA in Creative Writing. And in a way, we became known as a kind of anti-MFA organization. We were certainly anti the high prices of MFA programs, but we weren't really anti-MFA. We were just anti some of the frustrations that many of us experienced in our own MFA programs. And we kept hearing those frustrations from our students. My approach has always been to provide the kinds of workshops that I didn't have. And that meant really anchoring all our work in close reading and in issues of craft to try to take away some of the mystery and the smoke of creative writing, and to take a look at nuts and bolts and to establish a clear common vocabulary so that you could approach the work on the page from the perspective of how well it was succeeding at a clearly defined task, rather than how great of a story or novelist this particular work represented. So I'm going to read from my own stabs into the unknown. I'm working on a novel in Link Stories called Work Until Failure. And it's a kind of mulligan stew of flash fiction, short story, interview, and so many other things. I'll read a piece of flash from that called Pinned, concerning a wrestling match involving its protagonist, Clifford Foote. So this is called Pinned. 8 seconds after the whistle starting the first period of Cliff's first wrestling match ever against the wrestling team of neighboring Nesconset High, in his own gym, in front of his classmates and teammates and teachers, who mostly he hated and who hated him, and especially in front of all the girls from the 8th, 9th, and 10th grades, all the girls he hoped one day would stop ignoring him, begin recognizing him, start whispering about him, make themselves available to him. Before even extending an arm to feel for his opponent's weakness or strength, here he was, flat on his back, as though a great gust of wind had struck him so hard in the chest that his feet came out from under him, and he thudded onto the purple mat beneath the refrigerator-sized body of his opponent, a 9th grader like himself, but with a weird, long, multi-syllabic Greek name that didn't even fit on the scorecard, and thick black hair coiling out of every speck of flesh exposed outside his singlet, pinned so hard on his shoulders he could barely wriggle, the strength and weight of his opponent like a cement block, immobilizing every centimeter of his body, his trained body, his weightlifting body, his wrestler's body, struggling to keep at least one shoulder off the mat, struggling to get his feet planted firmly enough to bridge onto his neck and flip over, flip his opponent, or at least unsettle his opponent long enough to scramble out from under him, get to his knees, maybe his feet, and get the 1 point for escape, but feeling that each effort he made met only with double the counter effort from the hairy Greek, who could not be a 9th grader, Cliff was thinking. No way, a 10th grader at least, maybe 11th, the thick sideburns, the stubble on his chin scraping Cliff's neck like sandpaper. And suddenly the referee, down on his knees, his face inches from Cliff's face, a whistle in his mouth, his hand on the mat probing for space beneath Cliff's shoulders, and Cliff hearing through the cheers and the jeers and the riot in his mind, the ref's hand clapped down on the mat surface once, twice, and simultaneous to the shriek of the whistle, the 3rd time, match over, Cliff pinned, not even beaten by points, not even into a second period, even a second minute, pinned and disposed of like a child in 19 seconds. The crowd erupted, the Greek leapt up, the ref in black and white striped shirt raved the Greek's arm over his head in victory, and the outcomes announcement over the PA concluding with the observation that the announcement took longer than the match itself. The Greek boy shook Cliff's hand, then bounded over to his team where his teammates surrounded him, hugged him, lifted him aloft, and Cliff, fighting back tears, wobbling in a leg rubbery daze until the referee gently spun him around and pointed him to his team's side. His teammates came forward to console him. Cliff waved them off, continued past them, past the gloating teachers and the giggling, pointing girls, past the trophies on display, past the framed photographs of the school's past champions, out the gym side door where, in the corridor, the glass surface of a coin machine filled with apples reflected Cliff's image in the team wrestling singlet, his thin, hairless, sweatless arms, and Cliff shook his head in disgust. Pinned, he said to his reflection, you ridiculous fucking pussy. He proceeded down the cold, empty corridors into the locker room, the cheers and buzzers and whistles of the match a soft blur. Cliff stripped out of his team singlet, tossed it into the trash, pulled on his street clothes, his bell-bottoms, his Nehru shirt, his moccasins with the fringe, his navy pea coat with the epaulettes, and he stood in front of the smudged and cracked mirrors, his long, lank hair, which Coach hated, as did his father, tangled in a mess falling to his shoulders. Then he opened the lockers of the visiting team and stole the money from every one of their wallets. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Tim. And yes, as mentioned, if you look at the New York Writers Workshop website, you can see more about the upcoming program. I should mention, in addition to Grazie Deledda's home, Antonio Gramsci's house is in Sardinia. And of course, there are these wonderful beaches. And I have to say, I have such admiration and fondness for all of the faculty here. And that certainly goes for our next reader, James Scudamore, a British novelist and essayist whose work explores contemporary society through psychologically rich and stylistically distinctive fiction. He's the author of the novels English Monsters, Reeking, Heliopolis, and The Amnesia Clinic, and his writing has appeared widely in many magazines, including Granta, Tin House, 1843, The Sunday Times, and The Telegraph. His work has received the Somerset Maugham Award and has been nominated for major literary prizes, including the Costa First Novel Award, the Commonwealth Writers Prize, the Dylan Thomas Prize, and indeed longlisted for the Booker Prize. So within the Masters, he will mentor students in novel writing and literary fiction, particular attention to narrative, architecture, voice, and the exploration of contemporary themes. He's also been in Sardinia and can certainly speak to the joys and majesties of the city. James, wonderful to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. I hope everyone can hear me. I've got a dodgy connection. I'm so excited to be a part of this new venture and this program, and so excited that it's based in Sardinia because I've had wonderful and enriching times there. I'm going to read the opening of a new novel, and it relates a lot to what others have said during the course of this broadcast. It relates to what Victoria was saying about how to pursue a life, the question of how to pursue a writer's life in a world that seems hell-bent on making that harder. It relates a little to what Robin was saying about nostalgia, but it also hopefully might be of use to anyone thinking of joining us as a student, because it's about really a protagonist who pursues increasingly manic and deranged ideas about how to break into what he perceives to be the closed world of writing and literature, and ultimately culminates in an insane and doomed quest to persuade James Joyce's grandson to let him ghostwrite his memoirs. So I'm just going to read the opening few pages of this new novel. Okay. Dog on the runway. Our wheels nudged the tarmac once, then jets erupted as throttles were shoved open and the anticipated gentle thud of arrival was abolished. The airframe shuddered as we clawed back skywards. Seats pressed into spines. Buildings rushed and fell away instead of slowing into the shape of a destination. The pilot made a jaunty announcement about it once we'd regained altitude. The engines had stopped squealing and most of the praying had abated. Excuse me. A nervy serenity of that regained calm. You could hear the training in his voice. The guy was so emphatically cheerful he might as well have hollered, "Bet that woke you up, motherfuckers." And there was I, having spent much of the flight congratulating myself on the robustness of my anxiety management plan. My current strategy was to pay close attention to the small ones. That, I hoped, would keep the Leviathan hulks lurking safely down below. I'd found that it was when the little worries started shimmering on the surface like iridescent minnows that the unthinkable monsters, the eyeless trench dwellers, tended to breach most dramatically. The watchword, I decided, was control. So I had eaten and, more to the point, drunk in moderation, and knowing that this was one of the first flights of the day into New Delhi, I'd got my head down early and asked to be woken in good time before we landed, hoping to get to work before the jet lag started to bite on the task of replenishing my soul. While our unplanned fairground swoop did not in itself put me out, actually watching the different ways the adrenaline detonated around me was fascinating. The commotion, followed by the churning sense of unease as we circled, was enough to scramble all these careful preparations. By the time our wheels finally touched the ground, I was agitated in several ways. Grumpy to have missed out on sleep, concerned that we were so late I might miss the bus transfer taking me onward, livid to have declined all that food and booze for no good reason. And I was worried about the dog. At passport control, an official with a fiercely clipped moustache asked if I was visiting India for work or pleasure. My fingers fretted the sweaty fragments of my boarding pass. Both, I hope. Well, which is it? It's work, but I'm still hoping to enjoy it. I need a single answer. They didn't shoot it, did they? He blinked. Excuse me? We had to go around because it ran onto the runway. I just hope nothing nasty happened to it. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it wasn't the dog's fault, was it? It's just trying to get by, same as the rest of us. Yes, sir. You're saying it was the dog's fault? No, sir. I'm fond of animals. I keep birds. In cages? It's a generously sized aviary. They are protected from predators and have plenty of space. All right, then. I fixed his gaze for a moment, then moved on before he decided to detain me for instability. The thrill of being here couldn't be quelled for long, though, and I had recovered my optimism by the time I emerged at arrivals to be greeted with a crushing handshake by one of the festival administrators, a cheerful, bald man named Rahul. Mr. Mays, he said. Leo, hi. Outstanding. He seized my bag and led me with great purpose out of the terminal to a multi-story car park where he'd made an amazingly permanent-looking encampment around the bus. Picnic chairs and a trestle table laid with a tea urn and platters of food. He tossed my luggage into the belly of the vehicle and invited me to take refreshment while he went back to meet someone off another flight. It was diverting to watch each new arrival experience the same feelings as me. Irritation at the deferral of the next leg of the journey, relief at the sight of the food and drink, relaxation into the increasingly convivial atmosphere as the gathering swelled. One by one, we were all coaxed into it, and there was a striking feeling of completeness and excitement when Rahul finally declared that everyone was here and we could set off. It was clever of him. It meant that we were starting to define I'm back. Hope everyone can hear me. It was clever of him. It meant we were starting to define ourselves as a group before the journey even began and long before the accident, which was to sear us all together later in the day. We nudged through the ripe chaos of the city. Vendors crowded the windows. Desperate people paraded their deformities. Finally, we extracted ourselves and relaxed into a landscape that became less urban and more beautiful by the hour. It was a big bus, and we didn't fill it, so everyone arranged themselves separately, like molecules repelling one another in a chemistry experiment. But through little chats, food and bathroom stops as the day went on, I managed to meet most of my fellow passengers before seeing how they fared in a crisis. There were journalists as well as the usual novelists, poets, and dramatists. There were writers from Europe, America, and Africa, as well as the Asians and Australians that I'd expected. One author in particular snagged my attention, a Dane called Peterson. Having been almost unknown outside his home country for years, he had acquired a cult following with the English translation of his fifth novel, At the Crest of the Morning, before achieving global renown with its follow-up, Towards the Middle of the Afternoon. I'd bought the damn thing myself at the airport on the way here, never dreaming I might be sitting 2 rows behind him on a bus within hours. Critics had been raving about the book's attention to detail and the way they elevated unremarkable lives into something beautiful and consequential. I also knew, because I'd studied the list of appointees following my own latest failed application, that Peterson was one of this year's Boguski Fellows. I wouldn't have been quite so interested in the winners had I not received an email telling me I was one of them, only to check the official announcement and find that my name was not on the list. I'd assumed somebody, probably an embittered student, was playing a prank. Then someone from the foundation had called me to apologize for the email, which they said had been sent in error before this year's decisions had been finalized. This was a relief in some ways, not least since I had already decided which student must be responsible and begun writing him a spectacularly insulting letter. But I couldn't escape the suspicion that one of this year's fellows had beaten me by the narrowest of margins, and I wondered now as I watched the back of Peterson's head if it was him. Good at travel, clearly, or at projecting that he was. Faded khaki garment somewhere between chore jacket and army fatigues, yet somehow not as unforgivable as either. Aquamarine scarf effortfully looped to look as effortlessly artistic as possible. 3-day coating of stubble weathering him nicely. Couldn't stop hammering away at his laptop, as if the spouting geyser of his creativity would otherwise be dangerously constrained. Periodically glancing up with surprise at the villages and fields we passed, as if his physical whereabouts were of little consequence beside the lavish worlds in his head. Now I was keen to study the front of him too. I'm going to stop there.
Wonderful. Great to see you, James. Thank you for sharing. Very excited about how this is evolving. All right, excellent. We're nearing the end. We're going to hear from a couple more faculty members. I encourage you all to send any questions that you might have. The website, of course, Deledda Masters, has all of the information that you need. And it is my real pleasure to introduce our next author. I'm hearing a little feedback.
Are you?
A little bit. Yes, maybe if I mute, it'll be fine. Sardinia is an internationally recognized writer whose work moves between fiction, prose, poetry, experimental literary forms. Her books challenge conventional narrative structures, exploring the relationships between time, memory, and language, while drawing deeply on layered histories of India. Her writing has appeared in major international journals, Granta, Poetry, The World Literature Today. She's taught in MFA programs in Asia and the US. And within the Master, she'll mentor students interested in experimental prose, pushing boundaries, prose poetry, hybrid forms, rethinking structure, voice, and boundaries between literary genres. She's also the founder and the editor of the marvelous online journal Almost Island, and the creator of the Almost Island Dialogues in New Delhi, which is an international gathering that brings together writers from India and abroad. So welcome, nice to have you here, Sharmista.
Thank you so much, Ravi, and thanks for organizing this. A great thanks to Chiriaco for having gotten this program together. So many dear friends that I see here who I taught with before, and lovely to come to read after James, my old friend. I will be reading literally 4 paragraphs, 2 paragraphs from an older book, which is, narrative, prose, and prose poemish together. It's called 5 Movements in Praise. So I'll read that first. It is an immense night, continuous with the universe. The same immensity that the doctor brings before me when he speaks about the age of the earth. He speaks of the formation of coastlines, the ancient rocks on the ocean floor. He knows that the immense is practical, useful. The same immensity waits outside elevator doors. It swallows those with the tongues of beggars who lick at the appearances of things. I am the night, and I watch the night. My dead father is part of this immensity, not as a face or a body, but broken down into atoms and become part of the darkness and air. Nothing truly loved retains its form, its boundaries. The man I will be with forever lives behind doors and windows, but the indestructible matter in him stretches and is attenuated so far that it becomes, like the night, pre-human. A scrawny goddess comes out of the night with 15 arms, 9 on the left and 6 on the right, arms that are bent at the elbow and raised over her head, like the antlers of a large insect. She has only one leg, the right, and that is enough to let her stand on the darkness. Her body is black-brown, her belly protruding from the rest of her thinness, and her open breasts are scrunched together. The arms came one by one as they were needed to fight back, to threaten, to shove, to strangle. They did not exist when she was born. She may yet grow a few more. There are always new things to attack, to protect, to tear out from the universe. Someone may have broken her leg and thrown her away as refuse, but she returned from the darkness behind the huts and trees, her new arms and the one leg all balancing each other. Now, if she was pushed to the ground, she could walk on her many hands. This is an immense night, continuous with the universe. This next one is a brief prose poem from a newer book. It's actually my last book, and it's called Extinctions. This poem is called Words. Words, less and less read, written, heard, seem to recede far as a seen reality comes forward. Images that show the husk of the world. The word comes from the infinite space of consciousness and returns into it with slowness, with afterness. Images of reality glide over the retina with ease. Within words, the leopard walks the streets only a few steps behind, so it is crucial to be vigilant. From words begin the unseen, unproven truths. Inside words are born all asking, whether in doubt or prayer. It is not in the blackness of space searching for planets that we are most original. It is in our words. In the evening, the little children play together for hours, and at the end, they say goodbye many times, as if they may not have heard each other, as if they were not sure they said it right, or perhaps to express the many meanings of the word in their hearts. I don't want to leave you. It was beautiful to be together. We will see each other tomorrow, even if they don't yet really know how soon tomorrow will come. That's all for the reading. I just wanted to add, as far as elements of teaching go, for me, one thing that's really important is depth, and more depth. So I keep concentrating on that. And it's almost for me like going through the crust, the mantle, and then the molten core of one's being. That's how I mean depth. The other thing that I very much want to talk about now when I'm teaching, I have been talking about it for the last few years. Now it seems so pertinent, given the precarity that we live in, that I want to talk about writing the universe, as in writing the human and the non-human together without a hierarchy between the two. Um, so that is something that's very, very important to me, to not create a separation between the animate and the not animate, the human and the non-human. So to write with light, a tree, an architecture, a consciousness, and bring all of it together. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sharmista. And you may get the sense that this MFA program is truly global, as literature should be. There are faculty from around the world, and we've heard from them today. And that certainly is the case with our next faculty member, Justin Hill, internationally acclaimed novelist. His work has been translated into 17 languages, recognized with major literary awards, including the Somerset Maugham Award, multiple Booker Prize nominations. His fiction explores historical settings, cross-cultural encounters, and the relationship between imagination and historical research. He has extensive experience teaching creative writing, undergraduate and MFA levels, and he brings a kind of craft-focused approach grounded in narrative structure, world building, and the disciplined development of long-form fiction. And within the masters, he will mentor students, particularly those of you who are working on novels, extended narrative projects, help you pay very close attention to structure, historical imagination, and the shaping of complex literary worlds. I think it's also fair to say probably the best dressed man in letters, Justin Hill. It's great to see you, Justin.
Hi, Ravi. Great to hear you. And thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure listening to everyone's stories about writing and reading from their own work as well. This year, actually, funnily enough, is the 30th year since I published my first book. So I'm very well about what kind of a journey writing can be. And it's not a race. It really is just kind of the journey itself. I want to thank Chiriaco as well for setting up this MFA. I'm so excited about this. I was involved with many of the faculty in Hong Kong at City University of Hong Kong. And it was just such an exciting program to be involved with. So really looking forward to catching up with old friends and making new friends as well. I'm also really excited about Sardinia because through Chiriaco, I've been a number of times. And it is such a fascinating place. I'm really interested in history. And Sardinia goes back into the prehistory. And is a fascinating, complex, beautiful, rugged place to be. And I'm so excited to be based in Oristano and working with students and working with you in getting your stories as good as they can be. I was a published author before I did a master's in creative writing, and I look back on the first few weeks of the masters where I was so excited. I never met writers. I didn't know any writers. And I was so excited to kind of go and spend my time immersed with other writers and talk about, commas and which word was right. And just to kind of immerse myself in it all. And I learned more in the first 2 weeks of that master's program than any other time in my writing, I think. It was so exciting. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating as well. And it's just great to be part of that because it's exciting as a faculty member as well. And it's very exciting for the students to kind of help them tell their story as well as possible. I'm going to read a novel that I've just finished. Actually, it's out with my agent and publisher at the moment, so I'm waiting to hear back. It does have a title, but I'm not quite sure about it, so I'm not going to give you the title. But it's a contemporary novel that follows a group of international students who grew up in Hong Kong, but as their city changes, One of the group dies in mysterious circumstances, and the narrator is drawn back into the past. And this passage is one I'm going to read from the beginning of the novel. It's a few chapters in. The narrator is 9 years old. He's living in York. He's at a friend's house for a play date. And this is the ordinary winter's day upon which his childhood ends. Graham's father was a maths professor at the university. His black hair was messy. His glasses sat a little low on his face. And he nodded to me and asked me a few simple questions. And I sat upright, answered with single words before he seemed to lose interest. Dinner was tinned spaghetti on toast and sausages. Graham's mother made conversation and then ran out of things to say, and we endured the silence as his dad finished his plate, left his knife and fork on the plate together, and picked up The Guardian. The headline ran, "I know I'll end up with a bullet in the back of my head. The Provos want peace activist Sean O'Callaghan dead, but he refuses to live in fear." Another headline read, "Beijing gives Branson balloon the green light." Graham's dad grunted and snorted to himself as he leafed through the pages. "Jelly?" Graham's mum asked. There was cold custard as well. Graham's mum called my parents again. The phone was one of those old-fashioned type, wired into the wall at shoulder height in the front hall. I could see her through the open doorway, standing formally, coiled cable hanging at her side, and the silence deepened. It was so still I could hear the ringtone, ringing off unanswered. "No answer," she said, and I wanted to cry as she put the phone down. She checked the number written in her phone book. We all knew our numbers off by heart then, and I repeated it back to her. "Yes, that's right." She closed the book, and Graham's father looked up. He seemed annoyed. "Do you know where your grandparents' number?" I shook my head. "No." My voice a croak. "I'm sure they'll be back soon," his mum said. Graham's father kept looking at me. "Do you know the address?" They lived on Warmers Road in Doncaster, a corner house. I didn't know the number, but the house had a street sign on it. "Maybe they're expecting us to bring you home," he said. "I'll drive him." "No," Graham's mum said. "I'll take him." Graham and I had to clear the Lego from the living room so his father could watch the 6 p.m. news. We went up to Graham's bedroom, but we'd run out of things to talk about, and in the end we sat in silence, and I heard his mother clearing her throat, the jingle of keys. "It's time to go," she called up the stairs. "Graham, are you going to come?" "No," he said, "I don't think so." He walked me down to the stairs, the front door, where I said, "Bye." "Bye," he said, and I walked out. The car was parked in the drive facing the house. "Sit in the front," Graham's mum said, and I felt very grown up as she inserted the key and started the car. I wish I'd gone to see my grandparents. They always brought chipolatas and set up little folding tables for us to eat around with ketchup and chips fried in a pan. I wished I'd spent the day in their little back room with the electric fire as Graham's mum revved the engine and inched slowly backwards out into the road. Graham's mum's parked and came out with me. The lights on my home were off. The garden gate clicked behind us as she walked me up the path, a hand on my shoulder. We both heard the doorbell ring inside. She rang the doorbell again and we stood waiting, but nothing happened. Only the faint meow as I felt a shape rub up against my leg. It was the family cat. He started purring almost straight away as I lifted him up and held him close, and Graham's mum rang the bell a third time, and there was still no answer. The neighbours on the right-hand side were sitting in their front room watching television. They did not move or make expressions as the white-blue light flickered over them. It was as if they were trapped in suspended animation. Graham's mum rang the doorbell, and after a moment the front hall light came on, and the chain was put on the door before it opened a hand's breadth. It was an old lady, the lady with the blue rinse, who went out during the day with a wheeled shopping basket and headscarf knotted over her head. "Hello," she said. The neighbour saw me and she knew me and took the chain off the hook. Graham's mum was flustered as she explained. "Oh dear," she said. "Come in. Let me get my teeth." She brought us into the kitchen, and Mrs. Willis poured me a finger's worth of squash concentrate into a glass, filled the glass up at the kitchen tap. I sat at the kitchen table as Graham's mum stood by the kitchen door, where the phone sat with the yellow pages tucked in beside a tin of tea. She pulled out the telephone directory, and they started to thumb through. It was a rotary phone, sitting on a small table with a chair next to it. I held my glass of orange squash, listened as the rotary clicked through the sequence of numbers. "Hello," Graham's mum called. I'm calling because I had a boy to come and play and his parents have not turned up. There was a pause. I think she was passing through to a number of different numbers. She repeated her problem 3 times. And at last she said, yes, they were supposed to pick him up at 4 o'clock. It was now nearly 8. I understood that she was calling the police, and I felt the weight of all this attention pressing down upon me. They were visiting his grandparents. No, he doesn't know the number. He's 9. There was another pause. Oh, she said, I see. She turned her back to me, cupped the mouthpiece, and lowered her voice. Your parents have a Volvo estate? I nodded. Silver? I nodded again. She turned her back on me. Yes, she said. There was a long pause as Graham's mum listened to the police. Yes, she said at last. Yes, I understand.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dustin. And we look forward to this novel being out. So welcome those of you who are just joining us. This is the Deledda Master's MFA faculty reading. I'm Ravi Shankar, and we've been hearing from the wonderful faculty. We'll have a couple more readings and then some time to answer some questions. It's my pleasure next to introduce Joe Alvaro. Joseph James Alvaro holds a PhD in English, a specialization in discourse studies. He brings extensive, is my camera working? I'm not sure if it is, but he brings extensive international experience in academic writing, critical discourse, and global Englishes. His research explores questions of voice, representation, and the relationship between language, power, and narrative form. His work focuses on how discourse shapes literary expression and intellectual argument, with particular attention to narrative structure, rhetorical precision, and cultural context of language. And so within the master, he'll bring something very different, a kind of critical insight. He's going to lead seminars on narrative structure, voice, critical reading, guiding students towards greater stylistic clarity, analytical depth, and the development of intellectually rigorous creative work. Welcome, Joe. And I think that you have something that you want to share with us, right? Which I'll try to bring up on screen. Oh, I think you're muted, Joe.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes, it's all good. I'm going to try to open this up for you.
Okay. Anything happening? Okay. So, like Ravi said, I come at writing from a very different position than the rest of the faculty here. My field is critical discourse analysis, which is basically the study of ideology and power and how it works through language. And it creates certain ways of seeing the world and making it, perhaps a little more analytical. It's an established discipline with a long tradition and has given me a particular way of looking at any piece of writing. So in my teaching, I use a particular textbook by Graff and Birkenstein called They Say, I Say. And the subtitle of that book is The Demystification of Academic Writing. Now, I'm not trying to say that academic writing and creative writing are the same thing. They're not. They're genuinely different. But there is something that is common to both. Beneath those two differences lie. And the first question we must ask is, who cares? And why does it matter? Why does this writing matter? And who cares about it? Can we move to the next slide? Shall I do that? Okay. So the point I wish to establish with students is how to answer those questions before the reader consciously asks them. So once the reader says to themselves, who cares? Once that question surfaces, the writing is already in difficulty. You can't step forward and explain why the character matters. The language must already have done that kind of work silently before the questions arrive. So I would call this work legitimation. It means the work that language does to earn acceptance and credibility, to get a reader to believe and to care, to keep going, read the next paragraph and the next chapter and so on, but without even really noticing that it's happening. Let me show you what I mean. So here are like two examples of writing. Fred still sets out 2 coffee cups every morning a year after the funeral. You care about Fred. Nobody explained it. Nobody argued you into it. Nobody told you he was lonely or that he loved his wife. The detail arrived first and the feeling followed. That is what I call legitimation, the quiet, invisible work that earns the reader's belief before the reader knows they have given it. Compare it with the one on the right. Fred was a lonely man who never got over the death of his wife. That sentence tells you the same thing, but it earns nothing. You have no reason to care about Fred because you've not been introduced to his character. You've been told about him, and there's a world of difference. So this is the difference between announcing what a reader should feel and building the context that lets them feel it on their own. The concrete detail does work that the abstract statement cannot do. The moment a writer steps back to explain what it means, then the spell is broken. The reader asks themselves, who cares? Why does this matter? And once the reader hears that voice in their head, the story is in trouble. So, okay, how does all of this fit into the MFA? It gives us a kind of critical position of how to look at our own writing. Legitimation gives you a way of reading your own work that is more precise than perhaps your intuition or instinct. You know, the feeling when someone or something on your page isn't working, but you can't locate the problem. Instead of thinking, this character isn't working, ask yourself, have I given this reader concrete detail that makes the person impossible to confuse with anyone else? Instead of thinking, this character feels like a stereotype, have I shown them doing something only they would do? Or have I described them like a casting sheet? You know, brown hair, blue eyes, Caucasian, medium build. Instead of thinking the ending sounds preachy, am I telling the reader what the story means? Or have I built the story so the meaning arrives on its own, unannounced? Instead of thinking, this part drags, is there a sentence where I stopped trusting the reader and started explaining what they should already feel? So I said at the beginning, I come at writing from a different door, but it's all the same room, more or less. Whether you're writing a novel, a poem, a dissertation, journal article, a speech, the work is still the same. You must answer the questions, who cares and why does it matter, before the reader asks them. So it's not about telling you what to write. It's about looking closely at what your language is already doing and catching the moment, because when these questions come to the reader's mind, you may have already lost them. So that's basically what I wanted to present from a sort of analytical side of writing.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Joe. It's great to have your voice among the cohort. And I think we're right at the end of our gathering here. I encourage those of you who are watching us, if you have any questions, we'll bring everyone else back on stage. And of course, I am one of the faculty mentors as well. I know that it's been a really rich, enriching, but long morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, of reading. So I'll just read one poem, although I teach, and I'll put some of my links in the chat, creative nonfiction at Tufts University. I teach journalism. I just published a memoir, and I've been doing some journalistic writing for a few magazines, but I'm also a well-published poet. And I hope that these are not separate genres. I mean, when I'm looking at writing, I often try to reverse engineer those great works of, and especially timeless works of art, to see syntactically what's happening, how can we take it apart, what are some of the things, and I'm also a big proponent of the classical rhetorical devices, of trying to master those and employ them. I mess around with form, and so I will just read in closing, and then we'll bring everyone back on stage, a poem that was just published for the Poetry Foundation Poem a Day, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day. And this is a poem called Final Stop. And I will just say, and the other thing about the MFA, there's the opportunity to collaborate, because in addition to this wonderful faculty you'll be working with, you'll also have a cohort of other aspiring writers, and some of those relationships that I formed when I did my MFA at Columbia decades ago still persist today. So having careful readers of your own work is another one of the wonderful gifts of the MFA program. This piece I'm going to read is collaborative in the sense that it was an ekphrastic poem. Ekphrasis, of course, being the visual representation, or the verbal representation of something visual, a work of art, a painting, a photograph. This was a response to Rhode Island photographer Don Mays. Took a photograph in Lincoln Woods, and in the middle of the woods, he located this railroad tie that had an enormous tree growing in the middle of it. And so this was my response. It's a poem called Final Stop, and it has a little epigraph from Hermann Hesse. Trees have always been the most penetrating preachers. When the railroad first came to the edge of the mountain, men in buckskin breeches called it the Gravity Road. They pounded on solid rock from dawn to dusk, dangled off cliff faces and woven reed baskets to drive steel spikes into stone with a primal, accentual, hand-hammered beat. When the railroad first arrived at the sedge edge of prairie, bison were picked off from their herds, sometimes to cure into hams, skinned for coats, or culled for bones to ship east and market as fertilizer, glue, plates, or umbrella handles. Other times, they were shot just to rot where they dropped. When the railroad first built a station on the city's outskirts, families gathered on hillsides to watch black smoke plume, hitched horses and abandoned stagecoaches to whisper about Pullman palace cars with velvet seats, brass rails, gas lights, knuckle couplers, air brakes, 5 stars for a fee. When the railroad first threatened the forest tree line, shackled men with skin dark as bark and forced to work in quarries and mines began to hack at stumps and hummus with shovels. They left their lives in leaf fall, and the roots regenerated. Unlike us, forests grow slow, in no time zone. When the railroad first swam into the camera's viewfinder, no train had used its timber ties for a span only the rings of a tree might tell, but won't. Listen closely to the trunk. When our hurtling headlong is blocked, we need to change not just direction, but dimension. Decelerate. Look up. All right. So thank you all. That's my poem, Final Stop. And I'm going to bring everyone here back on stage. And maybe thank you all for that wonderful reading. This will be archived on YouTube. The Deledda Master's website has a lot of important information, but I thought maybe I would just begin by asking you, Kyriako, folks and Evan, folks might be wondering a little bit about the cost of the MFA program. Yes, I think it might be. There seems to be some kind of echo. Yes, you can all keep muted until someone's speaking. Could you tell us a little bit about like the financial particulars if we have an interested student?
Evan, can you answer?
I was afraid you were going to throw that at me.
It's not my job.
Oh, it is mine. Okay. Financial particulars. Well, the general particulars are that in the low residency MFA world, I'd say it's one of the most affordable programs in that everything is done by credits, and you earn between 32 and 36 credits, depending on whether you come to a 4th residency or just 3. And the accommodations are included, and it's a lovely, recently renovated building, very simply done. So the rooms are there for anybody who would like that option. You can also take a hotel or an Airbnb in town. And a small Italian breakfast, a continental breakfast is included as well. I think the total comes to less than $25,000 for the entire degree, and there are possibilities to pay in installments. It's all been worked out quite neatly.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And we have another question here coming from the chat. What are the qualifications that you need to get into the program? Does somebody need to be published? Do they have had to have their work in online journals or in print in order to be accepted into the program?
No, I think the best way to look at it is that, first of all, with the sample, the writing sample is really important to us. Obviously, we read everything. We discuss the works that are coming in. And I think something else that's important is a quality that's a little hard to define, but I call it being teachable. You know, when you come to a program like this, you have to want to learn from the people around you, the people in your cohort and the people teaching you. So those are really the most important elements. But if anybody else would like to add anything, please jump in.
Correct. Yep.
Yes. I have a related question. I'm going to throw this out to everyone. I mean, I would agree that some of my students at the MFA programs I've taught at, a few of them have had little to no experience, but a voracious appetite as a reader and a curiosity. And those elements, I think, are really the most important things, the ability to kind of read widely and voraciously. But I have a question I'm going to throw this out to everyone, and I'm going to be cycling in because we can only have 10 of us on the screen. I'll cycle in the faculty so we can be all part of the discussion. But how are people dealing with the emergence of AI, and how does it relate to your own creative practice? If we have writers here that are a little worried about finding their own voice when we live in this this kind of confusing, perplexing time, what is your stance about it? How do you deal with it? Anyone at all?
Justin.
Yeah.
Tell us something.
Well, AI, it's I've certainly used it, and I mean, in a sense, it's very difficult not to use AI. If you're Googling something, you're essentially using AI. I have used it, and I've used it to research things, and I've actually found it very useful. I guess there's so many different ways you can use AI. I mean, I think you don't use AI to write something, but I find it very useful to researching things and giving me information. And essentially, it just speeds things up. I mean, you know, I've been published for 30 years. So my first historical novel was, it was set in an Anglo-Saxon village in West Sussex, a place I'd never been to. And I would trace, you know, kind of the path my character was taking on Google Earth to see if I was going uphill or downhill. And, you know, essentially I can do that now with AI, you know, rather than taking me hours trying to research this stuff. AI I find is very useful as a kind of research tool. And yeah, I wonder if anyone else has used it or found it helpful in that way.
Yeah, I agree.
I've used it. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I was writing a story about a bus route in London, and I wasn't sure of the order of the stops and the different areas of the city. So I used AI to help me to, you know, make it like real, like get off at this stop, go to this, you know, this underground place and all that kind of stuff. So it helps like geographically to get things correct, you know. So it would help me a lot in that.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing from people is, I mean, I think it is a tool. There's a wonderful article, we'll put it in the chat, from Megan O'Rourke about what AI does to creative writing. And ultimately, for things like geographic location or for historical reference, it can be a wonderful tool, but it's not going to replace your voice, right? I mean, I can tell, and I've actually done some contract work for AI company, there's a way in which complexity is flattened out. There's a way in which the very depth that Sharmista was talking about is missing. You very rarely go to the molten core. And there are these kinds of patterns and tics that I think are like a cliche in language that prevent us from actually examining and transforming our experiences into something of aesthetic value. Rachel, I thought I saw you gesticulating here.
Yeah, I just to chime in on top of, and I agree with what everyone has said. Sorry, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
What's happening on the screen? Okay. So yeah, I mean, using AI assist in research or Googling and all that, we all end up there to some degree or another. But I think the thing that I hear the most worry about from writing students is, you know, is AI writing going to replace human writing? And what if, you know, these AI stories get really good? And of course, I keep coming back to the fact that all AI can do is kind of put a bunch of things that have already been done in a blender and combine them into new combinations. But it can't create something that hasn't been done before. So it's a challenge to us to make sure that what we're doing is really fresh and really honest, and we're really interrogating. Like Sharmis does the molten core, we're really doing the best we can to be fresh. And then I think if we're doing that, it's okay. We'll be okay.
Yep, I agree.
Anyone else? James?
I would say just beware of the chimera of it, of thinking that because AI is a very bad writer. It's slick, and it's someone or some thing's idea of what polish is, but it doesn't contain any kind of heartbeat or any kind of truth. And I guess the danger is it's our responsibility as writers and readers not to fall for this deluded idea that because these things look polished and sound polished, that they are good writing. I think it's up to us to make sure that we continue to control our definition of what good writing and what true writing is. And that's just that is there for us to lose. There is no that we should not be steamrolled by a piece of technology into redefining what our idea of aesthetic value is, and that's the danger. It seems to me it's a little bit like the way that when word processing came along, anything looks good when it's set out. It looks like a piece of writing when it's set out in nice justified paragraphs on a page, but that doesn't that you have to get beyond that. And this is for me it's just a more developed more advanced version of the same problem, if that makes sense.
Mm.
It's false.
Great. And I know we're getting close to the end of our time together. Maybe we could leave off with if folks want to tell us about something that you're reading or that you're excited about, something that is maybe relevant to the kind of exceptional literature that you would introduce when you're teaching in the program. What's been energizing you? And it doesn't have to be, of course, a work of literature or could be anything at all, but what are you thinking about? What has you kind of energized and concerned at this particular moment here in a difficult time? I think we can all agree. Yeah, Robin.
Yeah, I'm reading right now. It's taken me a while to get to it, but I'm reading Gish Jen's Bad Girl. I really love the book. I've been very interested in autofiction for a number of years. Wrote one autofiction novel, and I just love the way Gish works on both autobiography and this dialogue with her now deceased mother, and it's just a delightful book.
I can add something. I had the great pleasure this year of 4 former students of mine publishing novels with big, important literary houses and commercial houses. And I've been reading through these novels. These were all students that I personally mentored. And, you know, there was a process that happened after I finished working with them. But one book that I can recommend, Elie Raphael's book called Night Objects, which I worked really hard with her on. And then, you know, she went off into the world, and maybe 6 or 8 years later, I don't know how long it was, produced this utterly gorgeous novel. And it is so exciting to read it because it's a beautiful novel, but also because I remember what it looked like once and how it evolved. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about being a teacher of writing, is watching that process and seeing that, you know, sometimes all the best things happen with those books that our students are working on.
Rachel.
Yeah, I've been taking every chance I can find to see stage plays. For 2 reasons. One is that as a fiction writer, I'm always learning from stage plays because there's such a focus on the elements of a scene, what tension and things moving, and also things can't go on any longer than they should, or the audience starts crinkling candy wrappers. So it really focuses your attention on a scene and on tension and resolution, but also because in this day and age where we're all, you know, sitting looking often in horror at our screens at the news, and we're also separate, there's something about sitting in a theater with people and experiencing a story together as human beings and laughing together and being moved together that I find just reminds me of the power of stories in real time.
Mm. Anyone else?
Okay.
Oh, yes, Justin. I see Justin waving. He's on. I'm going to take myself off and bring Justin up.
What is just?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the Odyssey coming out this week. I read the Odyssey in Greek when I was a student, and I'm really excited to see what happens with this film. And I love in the summer to kind of revisit some of the classics. I think last year, or classical world, last year I read I, Claudius, and this year I have Daniel Mendelssohn's translation of the Odyssey to read. And he wrote an excellent book called The Three Rings, which came out a few years ago, and it was kind of creative nonfiction that was a mix of autobiography and creative writing, but a really interesting read. Anyway, so the Odyssey is going to be the thing that's exciting me in the next couple of weeks, I think.
Mm. Tim, you have anything? Of course, we're reading this wonderful contributor work from Sardinia, and I've been looking at Sea in Sardinia, D.H. Lawrence, and some of those classic Sardinian texts as we prepare for our visit.
Not classic Sardinian text so much. Some of the ones that we've recommended for the group, I think, do a number of things in really interesting ways that always challenge my preconceived notions. So one of them, the novel by David Zalé called Flesh, always wondering, how much you can get away with page after page of dialogue, often without attribution. I think that's a novel that the word or the statement "okay" appears more than 500 times, but there's probably about 250 different meanings to "okay." So for me, he kind of legitimizes allowing a scene to run and run and run without any kind of narration. And then on the other hand, we have the memoir by Anne Marlowe called Heroin from A to Z, which analyzes addiction from the perspective of kind of encyclopedia or a dictionary. And I love looking at alternative structures like that. They enable breakthroughs. So I'm hoping that a couple of those texts that we're going to look at in Sardinia do something for the participants we have. The participants we have are doing fantastic work. I've been looking at the manuscripts that have been coming in, and we're looking at a really significantly accomplished cohort. So I'm very excited to get to that work.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for taking the time. All of you who read, those of you who
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Ravi.
Watching, and then those of you who see the archive, absolutely take a look at the website. I think that it would be appropriate to leave Chiriaco and Evan with the final word. So I'm going to remove the rest of us from the screen. Thank you all again. It's been wonderful to spend some time with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Very kind. I'm moved. Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Well, we're here to answer questions, whatever you want to know. Chiriaco and I and all of the faculty members, we're available, and we look forward to reading your applications and meeting you in Sardinia in November.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, Ravi, for setting this up, and thanks everybody. It's a really great session.
Very great session. Thank you so much. Thank you.